I hope you've got your imp under control. I've got some spectacular tricks to show you, and some that are just alright. In this tutorial, you'll master the basic controls you learned in the home space. But this time, you'll have the full freedom of edit mode. Use the video player to play through the tutorial steps. Follow the steps carefully. It's not just about getting to the end, it's the journey that counts. So here we are. This is where the magic happens. Edit mode. The row of buttons you can see is the assembly menu. That's where you'll find all the tools and modes you need to construct your scenes. It can be opened and closed by pressing the square button. You won't need it just yet, so go ahead and close it with square. Somewhere in this scene I've hidden a puppet, which we'll need in later tutorials. I've left some clues to help you find it. Use the camera controls you learned in the home space to investigate the island. Here's a quick reminder. Use the left stick to move your imp. Use the right stick to look around the scene. To move your view, hold L1, then use the left stick to move left, right, forwards, and backwards. If you want to move up and down in the scene, just hold L1, then push the right stick up and down. Use L1 and the left and right sticks to look around the island. If you go flying off in the wrong direction and lose your bearings, don't worry. Just hover over the mode icon in the corner of the screen. In assembly mode, the icon is a puzzle piece. Here you'll find a camera bookmark that'll take you back to where you started in the scene. Select it with X and you'll be back in familiar territory. Can you find anything here that looks like a clue? Once you've found the clue, you're ready to move on to the next step. Press the arrow button on the video to continue. Did you find that clue? It was on the back of one of those shapes. Looks a bit like a rocket. I do love a cryptic message. Why don't you look around for any rocket-related goings-on? Ah, look over there. On that island in the distance. Those shapes look a lot like the ones in the clue. Go on. Fly over there and check it out. That island is quite far away though. A good opportunity to practice using the grab cam. Do you remember how to do that? To use the grab cam, just hover your imp over an object you want to go to, then hold R1. Your imp will grab onto the object. Now push up on the left stick to zoom forward. The further you push the left stick, the faster you'll move. Once you reach the island, release R1 to stop using the grab cam. Make sure you're looking right at the cylinder and the cone. The grab cam is a powerful tool for navigating scenes. In fact, it's so powerful, you could easily get lost in the scene if you accidentally grabbed the wrong object or zoomed out too far. But you can get back to where you started by using the camera bookmark. Just hover over the mode icon, then select the camera bookmark with X. If you need to re-watch any of the tutorial steps, you can. Use the skip buttons on the video player to move between tutorial steps. There's also a button to rewind 10 seconds if you miss something. Start the next step when you're ready to continue. Think back to the first clue. The cone was on top of the cylinder, right? In edit mode, you interact with everything using your imp, the very tip of your imp's pointy part. Move tool. Let can into how to reverse the video and play along with audio only. Or maximize it. Now that looks pretty good. Dimensional space is with the graph. Unlike mine, any adjust to all. Select the button again. Hey, look at that. Oh, because I put it there. Just play along with me. Why don't you look around with the right stick and see if you can find another molecule? There's one, over there by that island. You're hot on the trail. But before you go zooming over there with the grab cam, there's an even faster way to zip around scenes. Hover your imp over that orange cube in the distance. Now hold L1 and then press R1, the grab cam button. You don't have to hold it or use the stick this time. See? Told you it was quicker. L1 is a very special button. You know the way that on a computer keyboard, holding down Shift changes what some keys do? Well, in Dreams, holding down L1 changes what the other buttons do. Like the way we use L1 to change the function of the left and right sticks. That's not all it can do though. You'll learn lots of L1 shortcuts as you play through the tutorials. Now that you know how to move around quickly, see if you can find the next clue somewhere on this island. Remember to use the grab cam to look around the whole island. Once you've found the clue, you can move on. Did you find the next clue? It was on the back of the hands around of how to delete, and it undo and look around with. That was my final clue. You're an expert in moving around with. Position yourself and push. Keep pushing the stick until you reach. Right, here's the puppet I reserved for you. Let's call her Connie, 'cause she looks like a cone. We need to help Connie walk through the door to complete this tutorial. To do that, we're going to have to switch over to play mode. Remember, right now you're in edit mode. This is where you create and edit your scenes. In play mode, you can experience the scene just like a player would if they found it in the Dreamiverse. You can't make any changes in play mode, but you can take control of characters and try out what you've made. Switch over to play mode now. Just press the options button on your controller. Move your imp over the controller icon, then press X to select it. To control a puppet in a scene, you first need to possess it with R2. Try that now. She's full of beans, isn't she? I picked her just for you. Walk her around a bit, then take her through the door to finish this tutorial. Oh, looks like the door's too high. There's more to Connie than meets the eye, though. She might be able to reach it if you make her jump by pressing X. Oops. I remember now. I always forget to put the steps in. Better head back into edit mode. To switch back to edit mode, just press Options again, then select the pencil icon. Did you see those stairs on the island below us? Those might come in handy now, so strafe down to them with L1 and the right stick. If you've deleted the stairs, you can use Undo by pressing the left directional button. Just keep pressing it until the stairs come back. Okay, press and hold R2 to grab them. Now, without letting go of R2, hold L1 and use the right stick to strafe back up to Connie. Place the stairs in front of the door and let go of R2. There, that should do it. It's back to play mode now. Remember, press Options, then select the controller icon with X. You'll be switching back and forth between edit and play mode a lot when you're creating your own scenes. It's a great way to test out your scenes, making sure they look and work just how you want them to. Okay, I think we can get Connie to the next lesson now. All we need to do is walk her through the door. Possess Connie with R2, then climb up the stairs.
Music is all about repetitions and patterns, and cloning notes on the piano roll is a great way of creating these. You can clone individual notes by holding L1 when you grab them. But by selecting notes, you can clone the whole melody. Hover your imp over any note, then double-press X, and all the notes will be selected. You can also use this shortcut for selecting all items on a timeline or all the objects within a scope. Look over your performance in piano roll view and see where you can improve it. Use the beat and bar lines to arrange the notes so that they're in time. When you have notes selected on the piano roll, the Snap Notes button appears in the context menu. This button snaps all the selected notes to the nearest grid line. This is really useful for tightening up a performance. You don't have to make it perfect, though. Sometimes it's the little nuances and inconsistencies that give a piece of music its character. When you've finished editing the notes, move on to the next step, where I'll show you some more ways to use the piano roll. We've seen how the piano roll can be useful for editing a performance, but you can also compose directly onto it. If you don't still have your melody open it up again with L1 and X. You can switch between freeform and piano roll view with L1 and the touchpad button. Now go to the Sound menu and select Tools. Here you'll find some of the tools you're used to using, like Move, Clone, and Delete. The button with the pencil icon is Draw Notes. Select it with X. With the Draw Notes tool, you can use R2 to place notes directly onto the piano roll. Add some extra notes to the melody using Draw Notes. Hold R2 to draw longer notes. If you hold L1 and then press and hold R2 while using Draw Notes, you can even draw notes freehand. When you're done drawing notes, play it back with R3. The new notes I added in the piano roll sound different from the ones played in freeform view. That's because the notes drawn on the piano roll are not in an effect field. But there is a way to move notes into or out of an effect field. I'll show you how to do that in the final step. To move notes into effect fields, we need to go back to freeform view. Hold L1 and press the touchpad button to quickly switch views. Whenever you enter freeform view, your imp will always start performing. We don't need that right now though, so select Stop Performing in the context menu or hold L1 and press Circle over the canvas. Your imp will now be equipped with the Move tool. We can see how most of the notes were played in this effect field. But the ones added with the Draw Notes tool are in the centre of the canvas, away from the effect fields. If you can't see them, you might need to rewind time with L3. Rewinding time will condense all the notes on the freeform canvas, so you can see them all. To put the notes into the effect field, just grab them with R2. You can also select the notes with X. If you select notes, then switch views with L1 and the touchpad button, those notes will also be selected in piano roll view. Piano roll and freeform view are powerful tools on their own, but using them together, they're even more powerful. Practice using them to finish off the piece. There are plenty of instruments in the collection to try out. You can also find the finished song from this tutorial in the tutorial collection. When you're finished composing, head into play mode to listen to your composition in full. Then, when you're ready to finish the tutorial, just go to the Options menu and select the Exit Creation button. It's a stormy day in the Dreamiverse. At least, it sounded like it was. Oh, there it is. When sound effects don't tally with what's happening in the scene, it can lead to all sorts of confusion. So in this tutorial, we'll use timelines to synchronize sound effects with animations. I've also got some cool techniques to show you that'll take your audio design to the next level. As always, ahead of Connie are a few obstacles for her to cross. But first, take a look at the timeline in front of Connie. It's called Block Collapse Cutscene. I wonder what could be in it. Open it up with L1 and X and let's see. When you hover your imp over a timeline canvas, play and rewind buttons will pop out underneath it. These are the timeline preview controls. Using these buttons, we can play just the animations and sounds on the timeline. The rest of the scene will stay paused and no logic will activate. Try it out. Select the Play Timeline Preview button with X. The timeline contains an animation for the block falling over. But there's no sound effects to go with it. Easily fixed. But first you'll need to switch to sound mode. Go to the Assembly menu, then select Modes. Select the speaker icon to switch to sound mode. In the next step, we'll add some sound effects to the falling block. To add sound effects to the scene, we need to search the Dreamiverse. Go to the Sound menu, then select the button with the magnifying glass icon. In Sound mode, the Search button has some extra options for searching specific types of sounds. Select Search Sound Effects. I've made a collection of sounds for you to use in this tutorial, but you'll find lots more in the Dreamiverse. I've arranged these sound effects by type. Use the right stick to zoom in and the left stick to move around the collection. Find a creaking or rumbling sound that suggests the falling block. How about metal sheet groaning? Select a sound with X, then hover over the timeline canvas and press X to stamp the sound. Use the Play Timeline Preview button to see the animation with the sound effect. Much better. The sound started a bit too soon though, so I'll just move it a little to the right. Remember, softly pressing R2 lets you nudge. This is really useful when you want to be precise. You might also want to trim the sound so that it doesn't keep playing after the block has fallen over. To trim a sound, just hover your imp over one of its ends, then grab the glowing trim handle with R2. Use the timeline preview buttons to test the animation, then adjust the timing of the sound effect. When you've got it just right, move on to the next step. Now, let's find an almighty thud for when the blocks collide. Go back to the Sound menu and select Search Sound Effects. This cluster of sound effects are all impacts. Many sound effects actually contain multiple samples, so it won't sound exactly the same every time it plays. Massive rock and dirt sounds suitably cacophonous. Select an impact sound with X. On the timeline canvas, you'll see a pair of green gadgets with a curve between them. This is a keyframe animation. You can learn more about them in our keyframes and timelines tutorial. The second keyframe is the block in its collapsed position, so place your impact sound in line with that. Now use the preview timeline controls to play it back. That's more like it. If the sound effects aren't quite in sync, softly grab them with R2 to nudge them along the timeline, then play it back with the timeline preview controls. When you've finished editing the sounds, you can close the timeline. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1, then press the circle button to close it. Now try it out in play mode. There's a trigger zone built into the block that'll detect Connie and start the animation. Previewing the timeline in edit mode only played the animation and sounds, but in play mode, the camera and camera shaker also activate. Now the block falls with real drama. When you're ready to continue, hold L1, then press the circle button to close it. Now try it out in play mode. There's a trigger zone built into the block that'll detect Connie and start the animation. Previewing the timeline in edit mode only played the animation and sounds, but in play mode, the camera and camera shaker also activate. Now the block falls with real drama. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode and start the next step. The sound effects have really enhanced the platform animation. But this scene is big and open, whereas the sounds are flat and clean. To make them fit in this infinite space, we need to give the sounds some presence. One of the ways to do this is to add reverb to the sounds. Reverb is an echoey effect, like you'd hear if you shouted in a big empty space. You can add reverb to your sounds by tweaking them. First, select both the sounds on the timeline with X. Now tweak one of the sounds with L1 and the square button. That's a lot of options. Sound tweak menus are loaded with built-in effects and features. The tab we need is Sound FX. Its icon is a fuzzy sound wave. On this page, you'll find sliders for delay and reverb effects. Try increasing reverb to 40 or 50%. Then hit Play Timeline Preview to hear the difference. The sound is now much bigger and more spacious. The reverb has been applied to both sounds, even though we only tweaked one of them. That's because when you select multiple gadgets of the same type, you can tweak them all at once. A very neat trick you can use on all gadgets, not just sounds. Under the reverb slider, there are 4 available channels. Each channel has a different audio quality. A and B are designed for music, and C and D are designed for game sounds like sound effects and voices. Helpfully, all the sound effects from the Media Molecule sound effect collections are set to channel C by default. I think this cutscene is now finished. Close the tweak menu and timeline using L1 and circle. Then when you're ready, move on to the next step. Connie's next crossing is 2 rising platforms. See the timeline called Rising Platforms cutscene? Open it up with L1 and X. Select Play Timeline Preview to see the animation in action. Ah, this animation already has sound effects. It sounds okay, but it's very simple. Just one looping sound for each platform. Think about how machines and mechanisms sound. As well as having a constant working sound, they also make other sounds as they start up, slow down, or stop. Layering some of these extra sounds will create a richer audio. First, we have to switch back to sound mode using the Modes menu. Go to the Sound menu, then select Search Sound Effects. This cluster of sound effects are all mechanical sounds. Pick one to be the start sound for the platform. I've chosen Weighted Metal Mechanism. Stamp the sound at the start or just before the animation for the first platform. Now use Play Timeline Preview to hear how it sounds. The first platform sounded so much better, didn't it? Use L1 and R2 to clone the start sound over to the second platform animation. Then when you're ready, move on to the next step. Now let's add some clicks and clunks for when the platforms stop and lock into place. Go back into the tutorial collection and listen to some of these stop sounds. Pick one that goes with the other sounds you've used. This heavy-sprung metal stop should sound good with the sounds on my timeline. Stamp the stop sound at the end of the first keyframe animation, then clone it to the second animation. Pay attention to the sound wave on the gadget to see where the loud and quiet parts of the sounds are. Line up the loudest part of the sound with the point where the platforms stop moving. Now use Play Timeline Preview to hear how it sounds. Just by adding 2 extra sounds, the platform sounds so much more convincing. The looped sounds start and stop rather abruptly, though. Try smoothing them out using their trim and fade handles. Once you've finished creating your layered timeline, connect it to the button on the platform so Connie can activate it. Create a wire from the output port of the node called Button Activated. Connect the wire to the power port on the bottom of the timeline. You could also add some reverb, like we did with the falling block. Rewatch the previous step if you need a reminder of how to do it. Power port on the bottom of the timeline. You could also add some reverb, like we did with the falling block. Rewatch the previous step if you need a reminder of how to do it. You can access all the previous steps by selecting View Step Instructions on the video player. Then try it out in play mode. Return to edit mode and start the next step when you're ready to continue. It's pretty miserable weather we're having today. But in the Dreamiverse, that can be changed with the press of a button. If we're gonna bring the sun out, though, it's got to sound sunny too. Above the platform, there's a microchip named Ambience. Open it with L1 and X. There's a bit of logic set up here, but you'll need to finish it off. There's a couple of sound effects on the right-hand side of the microchip canvas. Jungle Evening and Heavy Rain. Those are the sound effects you can hear in the scene. Before we get into any logic, let's get some more ambient sound effects from the tutorial collection. First, we need to switch back to sound mode using the Modes menu. Go to the Sound menu, then select Search Sound Effects. This cluster of sounds are all good weather ambience. I'm choosing Sunny Day. Stamp it on the microchip, then click R3 to play the scene. The Sunny Day sound effect is playing at the same time as the rainy sounds. This will just confuse Cuthbert even more. We need a way to switch between the sounds, and I think a selector will be just the ticket. Click R3 again to pause the scene. The selector is found in the Gadgets menu, so you'll need to exit sound mode. Either use the exit button in the top right, or L1 and circle to return to assembly mode. Now go to the assembly menu and select Gadgets. Open up the Logic and Processing section, then find the selector. Once you've got it, select it with X and stamp one on the left of the microchip canvas. Then unequip the gadget with circle. In the next step, we'll look at the logic and connect up the selector. X and stamp one on the left of the microchip canvas. Then unequip the gadget with circle. In the next step, we'll look at the logic and connect up the selector. So let's look at the logic in this microchip. This active counter is being used to power the rain sounds and effects, which are all connected via this node. Counters are often used for setting states in logic. Try out the wiring and logic tutorial if you want to know more about using them. But as we now have a selector on the microchip, we can use that to set the state of the weather instead. On the selector, there are A and B inputs and outputs. The A output of the selector is active by default, so we'll use this to power the rainy state. Create a wire from the A output of the selector using R2 or X. Extend it over to the node called Rain and connect it to the input. Now that the rain is connected to the selector, we can delete the counter. Next, create a wire from the B output and drag it over to the sunny day sound effect. Connect it to the power port using R2 or X. If you want to create a layered daytime ambience, just connect more sound effects to the B output of the selector. Now we have two states for the selector. We just need to be able to switch between them. On the button on the platform, there's a node called Button Activated. Create a wire from the output port of Button Activated. Then stretch it up to the microchip and connect it to the B input on the selector. Now, when Connie stands on the button, the B output of the selector will be activated, the rain effects will stop, and the sunny day sound will start playing. But don't just take my word for it. Give it a try in play mode. Glorious! Hopefully that'll help Cuthbert dry out. Using selectors to change states is a really useful technique that you can use in all sorts of ways. You could trigger a transition from indoors to outdoors, or switch between reverb settings. You can learn more about using the selector in our Selectors and Exclusive Gates tutorial. You can find it in the Logic section. We've created a tranquil sunny day ambience, but as always, we can make it even better. So return to edit mode and start the next step when you're ready. You might have noticed the transition between the rainy and sunny day ambience was a little abrupt. The rain sound just stops instantly and the sunny one starts too suddenly. If the sounds were on a timeline, we could use trim and fade handles to blend them together. But as they aren't, it gives me the opportunity to show you the volume ADSR. Sounds very technical, doesn't it? Well, it is a bit, but don't worry, it's also a lot simpler than it sounds. Go back to the ambience microchip and select all the sound gadgets, the rainy ones and the sunny ones. Now tweak one of the gadgets with L1 and square. Remember, selecting a bunch of gadgets of the same type lets us tweak them all at once. On the first page of the tweak menu, you'll see a graphic tweak. This is the volume ADSR, which stands for Attack, Decay, Sustain, Release. The graph is made of 4 connected lines, with grabbable points joining them together. The first line is attack, which is the fade in. You can extend the attack by grabbing the second point on the graph. The second line is the decay. This fades the volume down and can be adjusted by grabbing the third point. The third line is sustain. This is a period of constant volume. Finally, the release, which fades out the sound completely. To blend the sound smoothly, use the volume ADSR graph to add a long attack and long release. This will make the volume fade in and fade out more slowly, so the sounds blend together. Use X to grab and drag the first part of the graph to the right. Then do the same to the last part. You want your ADSR to look like a trapezoid. And that's all there is to it. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. Now rewind time and try it in play mode again. Pay attention to the transition of the sounds and listen to how the rain sounds fade out slowly as the sunny day sounds fade in. We're almost done now, so return to edit mode and start the last step when you're ready to continue. The scene sounds fantastic now and is full of rich, dynamic sounds. I think you're ready to make your own scenes and creations sound alive. But there's one more gap for Connie to cross. Above the gap, you'll find a timeline gadget. Open it up with L1 and X. Select Play Timeline Preview to see the animation in action. Perfect! Just what Connie needs to get across. See if you can use what you've learned in this tutorial to add some vibrant sound effects to this animation. Maybe some whirring cogs and some ka-clunks for when they jolt into action. And then add some reverb to the sounds so they fit in this vast space. When you're ready to complete the tutorial, connect up the timeline to the button activated node on the platform. Then give your completed scene one last go in play mode. As always, take Connie into the elevator to complete the tutorial.
you